Part 28. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 272. How many good sisters do you have? Why do all of them marry tears? Tang Ning was writing and humming a song. Zhao Man watched for a while. At a certain moment, she suddenly looked at him and asked, "Were you just calling me stupid in a roundabout way?" Tang Ning shook his head and said, "Don't talk nonsense." "I didn't." Zhao Man frowned, "Swear." "I'm not. There are many advantages to being alone in the duty room. You can take off your shoes and sleep. Although the door of the duty room is open, no one will come in all day long except Princess Yingying. Of course, being alone for a long time is still a bit boring and lonely. Zhao Man's chattering beside him is a bit annoying, but it still helps to relieve boredom." After reading the latest content, Zhao Man propped up her chin with one hand, looked at Tang Ning and asked, "Are you going to take a day off tomorrow?" Tang Ning nodded. Zhao Man asked curiously, "What do you usually do during your day off?" "When the weather is good, I go out for a picnic. When the weather is bad, I play cards at home." Going out for a picnic. Zhao Man's face showed an interested look. After thinking for a while, she asked again, "What is playing cards?" "It's just a game." Tang Ning didn't plan to explain it to her in detail. For someone who is extremely bored on weekdays, playing cards is a very tempting game. Su Mei is like this. After playing a few times, she is no longer satisfied with just playing cards. The location of the game has also changed from the table to the bed. He came to the Hanlin Academy to work, not to play cards. Who knows if this is Princess Yingying's trap, wanting to fish for law enforcement and let the emperor beat him. Game. Zhao Man blinked and said, "Then play with me." Tang Ning shook his head and said, "The Hanlin Academy is not a place for playing. If His Majesty knows, he will beat me." Zhao Man hurriedly said, "No, if you don't tell me and I don't tell you, no one will know." "No. Oh, just play with me, I'll go close the door so they can't see it." After staying in the duty room for a long time, the two Hanlin editors walked out of the duty room, stood in the corridor, and took a few deep breaths of fresh air. Squeak. The door of another duty room opposite them closed. The Hanlin Academy is an official office, not someone's private territory. The door of the duty room is not allowed to be closed when going to the office. One person was stunned and asked, "Was it the princess who closed the door just now?" The other person's face changed, "I didn't see anything just now." The two looked at each other, dared not stand outside the door, and quickly slipped back to their duty room. Before leaving the court, Tang Ning still hadn't finished the new volume he had to write today. He naturally didn't bring Mahjong with him when he came to the Hanlin Academy, but Zhao Man didn't let him go just because he didn't have Mahjong. She sat next to him and chatted with him until the court was over. After these days of contact, he found that although she was a little annoying and had some princess syndrome, she was not annoying. Tang Ning was not as confrontational with her as before. Zhao Man jumped into Changning Palace. A female official came forward and asked, "Did your highness go to the Hanlin Academy again?" "Yes, my father is so busy, I will help my father to see if they are lazy." Zhao Man smiled and said, "You don't know, those guys in the Hanlin Academy like to be lazy the most." The female official looked at her, was speechless for a moment, and could only retreat. A young maid quietly came up and said, "Princess, are you going to trouble Tang Hanlin again?" "Why should I trouble him?" Zhao Man smiled and said, "This man is really interesting. I have never heard of many of the things he said. It's a pity that my father doesn't let me leave the palace. Next time, let him bring it to the palace. The county magistrate is the head of a county. If it is in a remote prefecture or county, the county magistrate can still compete with the county magistrate by joining forces with the gentry officials in the county. But in a place like Ping'an County, if the county magistrate is tougher, the county magistrate will not get any benefits. However, doing so is not without disadvantages. If the county government is not united, many things will encounter unexpected obstacles. Since he was defeated in the confrontation with his father-in-law, County Magistrate Zhao completely let go of the affairs in his hands, saying that he was sick at home and did not see outsiders. The purpose of setting up a county magistrate in the county government is to help the county magistrate share the government affairs. In a county government like Ping'an County, there are countless trivial things every day. If the county magistrate is the only one, he will be exhausted. While County Magistrate Zhao was at home claiming to be ill, the Ministry of Justice issued an official document, ordering Ping'an County office to close several old cases from last year as soon as possible. In the past, the pursuit of thieves and other matters were supervised by the County Magistrate Office and the County Lieutenant Office. County Magistrate Zhao and County Lieutenant Zheng were in the same boat, but after being deprived of power, they simply stopped caring about it. A large number of case files were piled up together, and without their assistance, it was impossible to start. The two of them had a good plan. Although the Ministry of Justice could not interfere in the internal affairs of the County Magistrate Office, it could put pressure on the County Magistrate Office through these backlogged cases. In the annual performance evaluation of the County Magistrate, the public security situation is also a very important part. If the evaluation fails for 3 consecutive years, the county magistrate will be punished lightly or demoted. The official document from the Ministry of Justice came at a very good time. County Magistrate Zhao was just a county magistrate, and he could not influence the Ministry of Justice. Tang Ning originally thought that those people had already stopped, but he did not expect that they just used a more tactful and roundabout way to prevent anyone from finding any handle on them. Just like the confrontation between my father-in-law and County Magistrate Zhao, in the officialdom, although hidden arrows can hurt people, this kind of open and above-board method is more helpless. Tang family. The head of the Ministry of Justice stood in the hall, bowed respectfully, and said, "Sir, we have done everything according to your instructions." Tang Chi nodded and said, "Thank you for your hard work, Chief Su." Chief Su hurriedly said, "No, no." Tang Chi raised his hand and made a gesture, and a servant came up with a tray and said, "This is a small gift, please accept it, Chief Su." Chief Su looked up and did not refuse. He took it carefully and said, "Thank you, Lord Tang." After Chief Su left, a figure walked out of the back hall and asked, "Second uncle, for this trivial matter, we have gone through so many twists and turns, and even used the power of the Ministry of Justice, which may not have much effect. Is it worth it? 1,000-mile dam collapses because of an ant hole, so how can things be done in one go?" Tang Chi looked at him and asked, "Do you know why the Tang family lost last time?" Tang Jing looked out the window and said, "Because we underestimated him. If we had made up our minds to get rid of him after he came to Beijing, we wouldn't have ended up like this." "That's right," Tang Chi nodded and said, "It's a pity that we understood this truth too late. Many of the methods we could use before are no longer usable. There are many eyes outside staring at our Tang family. Your cousin is far more powerful than anyone can imagine." Tang Jing narrowed his eyes and said, "No matter how powerful he is, can he overthrow the entire Tang family, overthrow concubine Hui, and overthrow Prince Duan with his own strength?" Tang Chi patted his shoulder and said, "Half a year ago, your father and I thought the same thing. The price was that the Tang family lost an arm and its century-old reputation was ruined. You will inherit the Tang family in the future. You must not make the same mistakes we made." Tang Jing was stunned and bowed, saying, "Nephew, please teach me." Tianrunju. Tang Ning came out of Su Mei's backyard and walked towards the door when Su Mei's soft voice came from behind. "Are you leaving now?" Tang Ning turned around and said, "I have something urgent to do." "I'll sleep next time." Su Mei looked at him and asked, "What's the urgent matter?" Tang Ning briefly mentioned the backlog of cases to her. So it's these cases. Su Mei smiled, took a few steps forward, stretched out her hand to lift his chin, and said, "Call me sister, sister will help you." Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 273. Sister. Tang Ning looked at Su Mei and said without hesitation. Why should we work so hard to search for clues when we can just say sister? It is impossible to expect them to solve a case that was not solved a year ago in a short time. Wait. Su Mei glanced at him charmingly and walked out of the room. Tang Ning sat at the table, poured a cup of tea, looked around, and found that Su Mei's room was much cleaner and tidier than what he had seen before. It seems that Xiao Tao, this lazy maid, finally understands that her responsibilities as a maid are not to play sepak takraw in the yard all day long. The rag doll she gave her last time was still lying on her bed. As a substitute for herself, Tang Ning always felt a little strange when she saw the rag doll. He took a sip of tea and waited patiently. Su Mei walked into a room in the backyard and gently turned a vase placed on the bookcase. A wall in front of her also slowly rotated. She walked behind the wall, turned another vase, and the wall quickly closed again. Behind the wall was an extremely spacious room. The room was filled with bookshelves, and the bookshelves were filled with books and files. Several women were busy shuttling in the room. When they saw her coming in, they immediately bowed and said, "I've seen the girl." Su Mei looked at one of them and said, "Help me find some files." Not long after, the woman in the room started searching on the bookshelf. An old woman came from the front and asked, "Why are you looking for the files on these cases?" Su Mei said, "I am useful." The old woman frowned, "Is it because of that boy again?" Su Mei curled her lips and said, "He is my younger brother. As an older sister, what's wrong with helping my younger brother with a little help? Is this a small favor? Don't you know how much effort we put into collecting these things, only for you to give them to him for free?" The old woman frowned and said angrily, "Don't use your brother as a cover. Did you help your brother in bed?" Su Mei looked at her and said, "You are an old and disrespectful person, what are you talking about?" The old woman said in a deep voice, "You should know that keeping those people will be useful to us in the future. What you did as a favor this time was our strength." Su Mei said, "I have worked so hard and painstakingly to find and sort out these. We are not short of these too." The old woman looked at her for a long time, then turned around and said in a deep voice, "It's just this time, it won't happen next time." Su Mei stuck out her tongue, "You said the same thing last time." The old woman turned around and said, "What did you say?" Su Mei immediately said, "I say, thank you, master." Tang Ning had already drank 2 cups of tea, and during the process, she discovered that there was a hardcover version of the match placed beside Su Mei's bed. Even a strange woman like her is not immune to conventions. It seems that girls in this era are very fond of the drama of private life, and have a longing for freedom and beauty in love, which is exactly what the old saying says. Su Mei walked in from outside, handed him an envelope, and said, "It's all here." Tang Ning took the envelope, opened it, looked at it, then put it down, walked to the bed, threw the rag doll to the foot of the bed, took off her shoes and climbed onto the bed, saying, "Come on." Half an hour later, he came out of Su Mei's room and did not see the old beggar waiting outside the courtyard. When he walked into the main building of Tianrunju, he found that he was still eating and drinking in the accord. Since the wine from Lingzhou was shipped, the old beggar never drank any other wine, and he was not satisfied with picking his feet while drinking. To have wine, there must be food, and at the very least, a plate of pork head meat. Walking out of the main building, the old beggar burped from wine and said, "The butcher still cuts the pig head meat so deliciously, no one else has his knife skills." Tang Ning walked more than 10 steps when a figure suddenly bumped into her from the front. He hurriedly helped the old woman who had fallen to the ground and asked, "Old man, are you okay?" "It's okay." The old woman looked at him expressionlessly and left. Tang Ning looked at her leaving figure and couldn't help but sigh in her heart. In this era, people are generally aware of their shame. Although the old man's attitude was not very good, he did not take the opportunity to blackmail him. While walking on the road, he encountered an old man who fell. Almost all of them can be supported with confidence. Do not move. As soon as he started to take steps, the old beggar's voice suddenly came to his ears. His steps immediately stopped. The old beggar walked forward and touched the back of his neck. Tang Ning noticed that there was a small insect on his hand. This insect was not big in size. It looked like some kind of beetle. It was about the size of 2 grains of rice. Tang Ning had never seen it before and asked in surprise, "What is this?" "It's nothing, just a little bug." The old beggar shook his head, gently twisted his fingers to end the bug's life, then took a sip of wine, looked back, and murmured, "Strange, strange." As the two of them walked toward the entrance of Tianatianju, the old woman who had just bumped into Tang Ning was standing under a willow tree by the lake. She picked up a willow leaf, put it to her lips and started playing. Almost as soon as the music sounded, a figure rushed out of the small courtyard. Su Mei quickly ran to the tree, looked at the old woman, and said angrily, "What did you do to him?" The old woman said expressionlessly, "It's nothing, just let him suffer a little, and let him know that Tian Ranju's advantages are not so easy to take advantage of." "You!" Su Mei glared at her hatefully and ran outside quickly. Although there were not many people outside the main building of Tianranju at this time, there were still a few people. When they saw Miss Su Maisu not even wearing any shoes and running wildly on the road regardless of her manners, they all opened their mouths in shock. When Tang Ning was about to walk out of Tianatianju, she heard movement behind her. He turned around and saw Su Mei running over barefoot, and asked in surprise, "What's wrong with you?" Su Mei didn't answer him, walked up to him, put her hands on his shoulders, turned him around, looked up and down, front and back, and then asked nervously, "What's wrong with you? Do you feel any discomfort?" "No." Tang Ning looked at her strangely and asked, "Why did you come out without any shoes?" Su Mei looked at him again and asked, "Is everything okay?" Tang Ning said helplessly, "Do you think something is wrong with me?" Xiao Tao ran over panting from a distance and said, "Miss, shoes." Su Mei wiped her feet with the towel Xiao Tao brought before putting on her shoes. Tang Ning noticed that Su Mei's feet were small and slender. Unlike other women in the capital, she was not accustomed to applying cinnamon or dyeing her nails red. She had a purely natural beauty. Although they had shared beds and different pillows many times, she always wore footwear when she slept in the same bed with him. This was the first time Tang Ning saw her feet. Seeing that he was really fine, Su Mei glanced at him and asked, "What are you looking at?" Tang Ning looked away and said, "In the future, no matter how urgent it is, remember to put on your shoes. A girl's feet are not visible to outsiders." Su Mei curled her lips disdainfully and said, "There are no such rules in our hometown. If someone sees your feet, you will die." "How stupid!" Tang Ning corrected her, "It doesn't have to be life or death. You can still marry that person." "Marry you?" Su Mei looked at him and reminded, "I didn't expect you to have such an idea. I am your sister. This is nonsense." As expected, he couldn't tease Sister Fox. Tang Ning waved her hand and said, "Go back and sleep for a while. I'm leaving." He and the old beggar walked to the street and suddenly asked, "Is there anything weird about the insect that Senior just crushed to death?" The old beggar took a sip of wine, smacked his lips, and said, unexpectedly, "There are still people who know the art of cultivating voodoo, but it's a pity that the Taoism is not enough. Among the masters of voodoo that I knew when I was young, which one is not a voodoo master, invisibly? Goo magic." When Tang Ning heard this, he couldn't help but shudder. Although he had never seen such a legendary thing, it was often seen in movies, TV series, and novels. People described it as something magical, and their expressions changed when they heard it. He didn't expect it to happen. One day I actually met him. That old woman was so vicious. He just bumped into her, but she took the initiative to bump into her, so she was so cruel to him. Sumei seemed to know something. She should ask her carefully next time. However, Gu technique sounds very powerful. If you can learn it, wouldn't it be possible to defeat the weak with the strong? You don't need to be better than Tang Yao Yao in martial arts to press her to the ground and rub her. Tang Ning's eyes sparkled and she looked at the old beggar. The old beggar waved his hand and said, "Don't look at me, I don't know how." First release of this chapter like Have Voice Novel Network, please remember the URL. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 274. The old beggar is well informed and sells martial arts secrets like cabbage. There must be martial arts in this world that he does not know, but judging from his casual expression just now, he should be able to do voodoo. But the old beggar didn't want to teach him, and he couldn't force him to teach. For now, the thing contained in the envelope he is holding is more urgent than learning the art of Gu. He has already read the contents of the envelope, including several backlogged cases in the county government in the past year. The ins and outs of each case, who the murderer is, where he is now, and even the motive for the murder are analyzed in great detail. No wonder Sumei said that she didn't know her details. She could find out these things at will. Her power in Beijing was unimaginable. Tang Ning couldn't give these things directly to his father-in-law. He couldn't find a perfect reason. He couldn't say that Sumei gave them to him. He couldn't betray his teammates. Regardless of Sumei's identity, it does not affect their simple relationship as sleeping partners. The files on several cases together filled a whole box. Tang Ning asked Peng Chen to send 2 government officials to move all the files over. I don't know if it was intentional by County Magistrate Zhao, but the order of these files was disrupted. Just sorting them out and classifying them was not an easy task. Before Tang Ning asked them to move them over, he first asked them to sort out the files from the same case. The dossier of information is all brought together. What happened next was much simpler for him. After all, it is much simpler and easier to associate the result with the process after you already know it, than to infer a result that you don't know exists based on the process. Tang Ning spent 2 hours sorting out all the cases into a convincing context. If you follow these seemingly unrelated clues, you will get unexpected results. Xiao Xiao knocked on the door, walked in, and said, "Brother, it's time to eat." Tang Ning looked at her, thought for a moment, and said, "Xiao Xiao, come here, brother, I want to tell you something." After eating, Tang Ning would walk around the yard to eat. Xiao Xiao walked up to the old beggar and said, "Master, I want to learn the art of Gu." Poison. The old beggar thought for a while and said, "It's not good for girls to deal with those poisonous insects all day long, but there is no harm in learning the poison. The Liang kingdom has already perished like this. After many years, there are still disciples of Wangu sect here, so we have to guard against them." He muttered a few words to himself, nodded and said, "Master will teach you tomorrow." Tang Ning put all the files back into the box. The old beggar walked in and said, "Give me another jar of wine." Tang Ning said without raising her head, "No more." "It's gone." The old beggar was shocked. "Aren't there still dozens of altars?" Tang Ning glanced at him and said, "You don't know how to bewitch, why can't I lose my wine?" Although the old beggar has very high martial arts skills, there is one thing he needs to understand. The wine he regards as his lifeblood is his, and his only precious apprentice is also his. He eats his food, drinks his wine, and abducts his sister. As a result, every time when something comes to him, he either pretends to be stupid or just pretends to be stupid. Refuse, this is not how you behave. The old beggar showed a smile on his face and said, isn't it just a voodoo technique? It's easy to discuss. It's easy to discuss. You take out the wine first. At Ping'an County Government Office, Zhou Mingli looked at Tang Ning and asked in surprise, so fast? Tang Ning nodded and said, I read the files overnight and found some doubts. If I follow these doubts and investigate them, I might find something. Zhou Mingli carefully looked at the piece of paper handed over by Tang Ning, shook his head and said, these are just your guesses and cannot be used as evidence. If you have to string them together, they are too blunt and a bit unbelievable. Tang Ning smiled and said, when we eliminate all possibilities, no matter how unbelievable the remaining one is, it is a fact. He looked at the problem from God's perspective. After all, he knew all the context of the case and who the murderer was. However, he could not tell his father-in-law clearly about these things and could only let him investigate on his own. Among these cases, 2 were massacres, and one of them involved more than 20 lives. It once caused huge waves in the capital. If these cases could be solved, it would be a real political achievement. Zhou Mingli nodded and said, I will ask Peng Chen to investigate secretly. Tang Ning thought for a moment and then added, there is one more thing that my father-in-law can take a look at. He placed a piece of paper on the table and walked out slowly. Zhou Mingli picked up the piece of paper and looked at it, feeling slightly startled. What is written on this piece of paper is evidence that Zhao County Cheng accepted bribes and bent the law for personal gain. Although it is only one-sided, it is not difficult to confirm it by following the clues on the paper. However, since Prime Minister Zhao dared to accept it, it meant that he was doing it secretly. Where did Tang Ning get this piece of paper? He no longer wanted to find the reason for what happened to Tang Ning. He thought for a moment, walked outside the hall, and said, go to the county magistrate's office. County Cheng Yemen, Ho Yemen. County Magistrate Zhao and Lieutenant Zheng were playing chess leisurely. Lieutenant Zheng smiled and said, Your Majesty, this move is really good. Magistrate Zhou can't even hope to handle any of those cases. When the time comes, the criminal department will there is something to write about in the book. Magistrate Zhou failed the assessment in his first year of office. How can he hold his head high in this county government? Zhao Xiancheng played the game of chess leisurely and said, if Zhou Mingli wants power, I will give it to him. He has no ability to control it himself, but I can't blame him. He pinched a chess piece, and as soon as it fell, an official came to report it. Magistrate Zhou came and was waiting for him in the front office. Now you know how to find me, Zhao County Prime Minister said without raising his head, just say that I am unwell and I haven't seen you. Not long after, the Yamen servant walked to the front Yamen, bowed and said, Your Excellency, County Magistrate Zhao said he is not feeling well. Zhou Mingli glanced in the direction of the back office and said, in that case, let Mr. Zhao have a good rest. The evidence of Zhao Xiancheng's corruption was casually placed in an envelope by Su Mei, who was considered the culprit in those cases. This piece of paper was enough to remove him from the position of Xiancheng. There were many twists and turns in these cases. To be on the safe side, Tang Ning asked for 3 days leave from the Hanlin Academy. Peng Chen would report to him on the progress of the case at any time. In the Hanlin Academy, Zhao Man once again walked out of a room on duty somewhere, grabbed a random person and asked, where is Tang Ning? The man immediately said cautiously, back to the princess, Tang Xiaozuan is ill and is recuperating at home. He will not come to the courtyard in the past few days. He's sick. Zhao Man looked a little disappointed. He walked out of the Hanlin Academy and walked aimlessly in the palace. After a while, he came to a palace. Seeing Emperor Chen walking out of the palace, she was startled and asked, "Is your father leaving the palace again today?" Emperor Chen nodded. Since the last time he visited the Hanlin Academy, he had become interested in various government offices in Beijing. If he went to see them with his own eyes, he would always find something that he could not see in the palace. Zhao Man looked at him and begged, "Father, please take me with you this time. I haven't left the palace for a long time." Emperor Chen looked at her and said, "Father is not going out to play in the palace. Manner should stay in the palace and don't mess around." "I'm not messing around." Emperor Chen shook his head and said, "You are a princess who has not yet left the palace. It is unbecoming to leave the palace casually. If the imperial censor sees it." Yes, everything my father said is right." Zhao Man looked at him, blinked, and said, "But I don't want them to see it, and besides, my father can't always wear this dress when he goes out of the palace. Those people can see it from a distance. We have been prepared for a long time. My father should change into a set of ordinary clothes, and this is called leaving the palace incognito." Chen Huang thought about it and felt that what she said made sense. He nodded, looked at her and said, "I will only promise you this time, and you will not mess around in the future." "Hey, my father is the best." On the bustling streets of the capital, the young master held a folding fan and looked around, his smart eyes full of brilliance. A slightly fat man looked at a middle-aged man and asked respectfully, "Master, where are we going?" The middle-aged man thought for a moment and said, "Let's go to Ping'an County office first." Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 275. Ping'an County Government. Tang Ning was alone in the back office, and asked Peng Chen to arrange for the government officials to collect evidence one by one. It would be good to have a capable sister. In the future, she should be nicer to Suhuhu and hug her tightly. There is no chance that she will be asked to marry her in the future. Place. In the front office, the files of several cases were stacked on top of each other, and Zhong Mingli was sorting through them one by one, seemingly in a hurry. The government officials were not idle either, running around in and out of the hall. County Magistrate's office. County Magistrate Zhao looked at a police officer and asked, "You said Zhong Mingli found out the clues. Which case did he find out?" The policeman said, "It was Secretary Su's case last year." Su Shuli's case. Zhao Xiancheng thought for a while and said, "Then let him investigate. For a case that even the Ministry of Punishment can't find out, he really thinks he is Master Qing Tian." In August last year, a murder case occurred in the capital. The deceased was a minor official from Ping'an County government. He was burned to death at home. At that time, more than a dozen houses were affected, and several civilians died. In the capital, the impact is not small. The Ministry of Punishment has not yet concluded whether Secretary Su's death was an accident or a murder. How could Zhong Mingli get to the bottom of this case just by relying on some files? He used the title of county magistrate to guarantee that this time, Zhong Mingli would only become a joke to the entire county government. He glanced at County Captain Zheng and said, "Master Zheng, it's your turn." At the same time that Zheng County Lieutenant made his move, several figures walked to the gate of the county government office. If anyone pays attention, they can see that on the street in front of the county government office, there are many more pedestrians than usual, forming a siege around the county government office gate. A young man stepped forward and said a few words to the yamen servant at the gate of the county government office. The yamen servant swayed, then immediately stood up straight and allowed those people to walk in. The middle-aged man at the front stood in the courtyard of the yamen and looked around, with a slightly surprised expression on his face. For a small government office like Ping'an County government, the people working under the counter make people feel better than expected. Not to mention that their clothes were cleaner and neater than most of the government offices he had been to, and their spirits were better. They walked with their heads held high, and they didn't seem to be lazy. Busy. A government official discovered them, walked over and asked, "Are you?" Ling Yun showed a waste card and said, "You are busy with your business, we will take a look at the county government office." "What is this?" The Yamen officer glanced at his waistband and said, "Where are you serving as a county Yamen? You can take a look if you want." Ling Yun. The young administrator was about to ask again, when someone unexpectedly kicked him in the butt. An older government official stepped forward and said with a smile, "Please don't blame the new guy for being ignorant. I will inform the county magistrate right away." "No need." Ling Yun waved to him and said, "We are just taking a look at the county government office, and you stay with us." In the front office, Zhong Mingli was looking at the files at his desk. Hearing the voice coming from outside the door, he looked up and asked, "Who are you?" Tang Ning walked out from behind and saw several figures standing in the hall. She was startled and was about to speak. Zhong Mingli looked at him and said, "Let me introduce to you. This is Mr. Zhao from the criminal department." Tang Ning looked at Chen Huang, who was wearing casual clothes, and Zhao Man, who was standing behind Chen Huang and winking at him, dressed in men's clothing, and wondered which song they were singing. Wei Jian winked at him, and Tang Ning immediately came back to her senses, cupped her hands and said, "Mr. Zhao." Zhong Mingli looked at him and said, "I still have some files to sort out. You can take Mr. Zhao to the side room to sit down first." Tang Ning stretched out her hand and said, "Mr. Zhao, please." As soon as he walked out of the Yamen, Zhao Man looked at him and asked, "Didn't you say you were sick? Why are you here?" Cough, cough. Tang Ning coughed heavily, cupped her hands to Emperor Chen, and said, "Back to your Majesty, although I am sick, I really can't stay idle at home. As the county government has been busy recently, your Majesty also knowing that Magistrate Zhong is my father-in-law, I thought of coming to the county government office to see if there was anything I could do to help." Emperor Chen glanced at him and said, "Since you are sick, you should take a good rest at home. Local officials should take care of the county government affairs." Zhao Man walked up to him, looked at him carefully, and said, "I think you look very good. Are you pretending to be sick?" Cough, cough. Tang Ning coughed heavily into her face twice more and said weakly, "The doctor said my disease is contagious, so princess, please stay away from me." "You're spitting all over my face." Zhao Man glared at him and immediately hid away. Chen Huang looked at the police officers coming and going in the courtyard and asked, "Is the county government very busy recently?" Tang Ning nodded and said, "The Ministry of Punishment issued an official document instructing the county government to close several backlogged cases from last year as soon as possible. In recent days, everyone in the county government has been busy with this matter. I couldn't stay idle at home, so I came to take a look." Emperor Chen nodded and said, "Since you are here, show me around. This is my first time here at Ping'an County government." Tang Ning thought for a while and said, "I will take your Majesty to the county magistrate's office first." Within the county government office, in addition to the county magistrate's office, there are also the county government office, the county chief office, and the county official office, which are where other officials work. The county magistrate, Zheng County Lieutenant, took a sip of tea and said, "This time Zhong Mingli will replace all of you and me. If nothing is found, we can jointly impeach him as the county magistrate for acting arbitrarily and excluding alien. When the time comes, if your excellency asks the people above to exert some force, he, the county magistrate, may have to move to another place before his butt gets hot." County Lieutenant Zhao had a calm expression and said calmly, "Although I don't know what kind of luck he had, a county magistrate from another state could be promoted several levels in a row and sit in the position of Ping'an County Magistrate, but this position is not so easy to sit in. Even Magistrate Chang, who has a strong background, was defeated. He has no background in Beijing, how can he stand up? Could it be that he relies on his son-in-law who is in the Hanlin Academy? Tang Ning walked into the county magistrate's office and saw Magistrate Zhao and Lieutenant Zheng playing chess leisurely, just as the Yamen servant reported. He walked into the hall, looked at the two of them, and said unexpectedly, "The county government is so busy, 2 adults actually have the time to play chess." Zhao Xiancheng knew him, so he stood up and said calmly, "Tang Hanlin is not in the Hanlin Academy, why did he come to our county government?" Although Tang Ning is the #1 scholar, he is the chief official in this county's government office, and the Hanlin Academy's hand cannot reach this far. Tang Ning looked at him and asked, "Master Zhao, do you mean that I am meddling in other people's business?" Zhao Xiancheng shook his head and said, "If Tang Hanlin thinks so, I can't do anything about it." Chen Huang was originally in a good mood. Everyone from the Ping'an County Yamen to the county magistrate and down to the servants was not slacking off, but he did not expect that there was such a big difference between the former Yamen and the county magistrate. The county magistrate did everything himself. "I can't spare any time, but this county magistrate still has the heart to play chess and drink tea?" He stepped forward and asked in a deep voice, "Do you get the imperial salary just because you come to the county government office to drink tea and play chess?" Lieutenant Zheng stood up, pointed at him, and asked, "Who are you? Do you have the right to speak here?" Wei Jian took a step forward and said angrily, "How presumptuous!" Zheng County Lieutenant stood up and said, "You are so arrogant, you are talking about men and women, this is the county magistrate's office, who let you in?" Tang Jing quietly stepped aside. He was originally thinking about how to reveal Zhao Xiancheng's bribery and favoritism without leaving any trace. Now it seems that even this step has been omitted. Chen Huang looked at the two of them and his expression gradually darkened. There are many lazy officials in major county governments. When he is in a good mood, he will at least give a few verbal reprimands. As for the Ping'an County government, the county magistrate is so busy that he has no time to spare. The county magistrate is not only interested in playing chess, but he is also so arrogant and domineering. As the emperor, how can he not know the fishiness of this? He looked back at Ling Yun and said, "Take them both down." Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 276. In fact, when that neither yin nor yang voice appeared, Zhao County Cheng's expression changed a little. Since His Majesty's last unannounced visit to the Hanlin Academy, all the major government offices in the capital have been extremely careful. Sure enough, in the following period, His Majesty left the palace several times without any prior notice. It is said that the Ministry of Industry and the Jingzhou Mansion were caught off guard, and many officials were fined. Could it be that His Majesty came to Ping'an County Yamen today because he didn't know he took the wrong medicine? Unexpectedly, before he could confirm in a hurry, County Lieutenant Zheng spoke first. When he saw the figures pouring in from outside, his face immediately turned pale, his legs softened, he knelt on the ground, and said loudly, "Your Majesty, I am the Prime Minister of Ping'an County, please see Your Majesty." "Your Majesty, Your Majesty." County Lieutenant Zheng was startled. Looking at Prime Minister Zhao, his vision went dark and he lost consciousness. Chen Huang waved his hand and said, "Move on, and each person will hit 20 boards first." Only county magistrates and county lieutenants have always ordered others to be beaten. When have you ever seen them beaten? Zhao County Magistrate and Zheng County Lieutenant were pinned down in the yard by the government officials. They were beaten so hard that they screamed. No matter how busy the government officials were, he stopped what he was doing and came out to watch the fun. Zhou Mingli came out in a hurry and said in shock, This is Your Majesty," Tang Ning introduced helplessly. His father-in-law was only a 5th-rank official and was not qualified to go to court. Naturally, he had never met the emperor. Lord Zhao of the criminal department suddenly turned into His Majesty. Zhou Mingli was stunned for a moment, and then immediately bowed and saluted. "I, Zhou Mingli, Magistrate of Ping'an County, have met Your Majesty." No courtesy. Chen Huang's voice became much softer. The emperor personally visited the Ping'an County government office, and the officials in the government office were supposed to meet him immediately, but Emperor Chen refused to let it be publicized. All the fast-moving government officials only speculated that the actions of Zhao County Cheng and Zheng County Lieutenant in the past 2 days had angered County Magistrate Zhong, causing Magistrate Zhong to completely broke up with them. It's just that the county magistrate and county captain are not much lower than the county magistrate. Master Zhong is impulsive and may not end well in the future. In the front hall of the county government office, Emperor Chen looked at Zhong Mingli and asked, "The county government office is so busy. As the county magistrate and county lieutenant, you still have time to play chess in the government office. How do you, the county magistrate, do it?" Zhong Mingli immediately bowed and said, "I am guilty." Chen Huang waved his hand and asked, "Jingxian is different from prefecture and county. What difficulties have you encountered in handling county government affairs these days in Jingzhou?" Just as Zhong Mingli was about to open his mouth, Tang Ning coughed twice. He glanced at Tang Ning, and then said, "Your Majesty, the Prime Minister of Ping'an County formed a clique in the Yamen for personal gain, disobeyed orders and made the Yamen a mess. However, I have found out the evidence that he accepted bribes and bent the law for personal gain. We only need final confirmation. It will be submitted to the official department. I have also seen this matter." Emperor Chen looked at Ling Yun and said, "Order the officials to supervise this matter as soon as possible. No single moth is allowed to appear in the Jing County Yamen." Ling Yun cupped his hands and said, "I obey the order." My lord, my lord." A figure quickly ran in from outside. Zhong Mingli glanced at Emperor Chen, then looked at the Yamen servant and asked, "What's the matter?" The Yamen servant's face was bruised and he said, "My subordinate went to Shaoanbo's mansion to investigate the case, but was beaten out by the servants of Shaoanbo's mansion." "Uncle Shaoan," Chen Huang looked at Zhong Mingli and asked, "What case is Uncle Shaoan involved in?" Zhong Mingli said, "Back to your Majesty, in August last year, the clerk of Ping'an County government died at home. I found out a few days ago that this case was related to Shaoanbo, so I ordered the police to go quickly and pray for Shaoanbo. Come to the county government to inquire. I have some impressions of this case. This case was one of the most serious cases in the capital last year." Emperor Chen thought about it and said, "The Ministry of Punishment said this case was a fire case. How could it be related to Shaoanbo?" Tang Ning stepped forward and said, "Your Majesty, if there is a fire, the deceased will struggle before death and inhale soot in the mouth and nose. But if the person is dead before setting fire, there will be no soot in the mouth and nose. The case file contains an autopsy report made by 2 people. Although the civilians who were burned to death had soot in their mouths and noses, Su Shulai's mouth and nose were clean, indicating that he had been killed before the fire, and the murderer set the fire. It's just covering up the truth about the murder of Secretary Su." The envelope Su Mei gave him stated the whole story of the case. When he was flipping through the files, he accidentally came across this autopsy report, which could connect the key clues together. This piece of forensic common sense was something Tang Ning had read in an online novel before. He still remembered that the name of the novel seemed to be Traveling Through Time with a Clinic. Chen Huang looked at him and asked, "Can you infer this just from the soot in the mouth and nose of the deceased?" Tang Ning nodded and said, "Living people can lie, but dead people can never lie. They are more trustworthy than living people." Emperor Chen was still a little confused. Even if he was murdered, how could Shaoanbo be involved? Tang Ning explained, "But based on this case, it may not be possible to contact Shaoanbo, but a month before the case, Su Shulai's wife was molested by a dandy on the street. The case was brought to the county government, and it was finally settled. Then, a month later, Secretary Su and his wife both died at home. The dude who teased Secretary Su was the son of Shaoanbo." He looked at Chen Huang and said, "Based on this alone, It may not be possible to confirm that this case was ordered by Xiaobo Mansion, but human lives are at stake, so it is necessary to ask them to come to the county government to inquire. Emperor Chen asked, "Didn't the county government summon the son of Marquis Xiaoan last year?" Tang Ning explained, "Your Majesty, it has now been found out that it was Prime Minister Zhao who accepted the bribe from the Xiaoan Marquis mansion and removed Xiaoan Marquis' son from this case." Emperor Chen nodded and said, "Ling Yun, go to Xiaoan Ho's mansion and bring Xiaoan Ho's son." "Your Majesty, wait a minute." Tang Ning took a step forward and said, "I have a plan that I can use to test it out first." Emperor Chen looked at him and said, "Let's talk and listen." In the Xiaoan Ho mansion, a woman looked at the middle-aged man and asked, "Sir, why did they send Liner to the county government?" "What's that guy named Zhao doing?" The middle-aged man frowned, murmured, and then said, "Don't worry, I'm just asking a few words. I'll be back soon." Ping'an County Government. A young man, led by several police officers, walked into the county government office and asked, "Where is County Magistrate Zhao? If you have anything to ask, please ask quickly." A police officer led him into the county magistrate's office and said, "Master Zhao said that this time, the Ministry of Punishment issued a death order to investigate the case thoroughly, but the young master does not need to worry, as long as he has 10,000 taels of silver, he can do it. Help Xiaoan Ho Mansion settle this matter completely." 10,000 taels, the young man was suddenly shocked and said, "The man named Zhao is crazy. Didn't he already give him 1,000 taels last year? What else does he want with these 10,000 taels? To buy a coffin?" The policeman immediately said, "You can't blame Mr. Zhao for this. Who made you careless and make the case so big? It cost 8 lives. How could it be suppressed so easily?" The young man frowned and said, "Where is the person named Zhao? Let him come to see me." The policeman smiled and said, "The people from the criminal department are in the front office now, Mr. Zhao is accompanying them. The county government has found a lot of evidence. If Mr. Zhao hands it over, even Mr. Xiaoguan will not be able to save the young master of." The young man gritted his teeth and said in a deep voice, 10,000 taels is too much. Even the lion named Zhao must have a limit when he opens his mouth. The policeman looked at him and said, 10,000 taels can buy 8 lives. Young master can do the math. It's not a loss this time. The young master snorted coldly and said, "It's just 8 miserable lives, not worth so much money. Go tell the guy named Zhao, 5,000 taels, not even 1 tael more." Wow! In the back hall of the county magistrate's office, there was a sound of tables and chairs overturning. Chen Huang strode out of the back hall, put his foot on the young man's body, kicked him to the ground, and said angrily, "How come the imperial court has kept such bastards like you? You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 277. The arson case last year was not easy to try. Xiao Anbo was a powerful person. Ping'an County Court could not handle such a case, nor could they use all kinds of torture instruments like ordinary cases. However, Chen Huang heard everything he said just now, and he couldn't change his confession. There was no need to find any more evidence. In a rage, Chen Huang immediately asked 2 yamen runners to drag him down and beat him with 20 boards. This was a real 20 boards. After just 10 boards, Xiao Anbo's son could no longer wail. After 20 boards, he fainted. Xiao Anbo, who heard the news, stepped into the hall of the county government with anger on his face, pointed at Zhou Mingli's nose, and said angrily, "Mr. Zhou, what did you do to my son?" Zhou Mingli looked at him and said calmly, "Your son instigated others to murder Su Shuli's family, and also maliciously set fire, involving innocent people. This official has detained him temporarily in accordance with the laws of the dynasty. Murder, Xiao Anbo said angrily, how could my son do such a thing? You must have tortured him into confessing. I warn you, Zhou Mingli, don't think that being the magistrate of Ping'an County is great. If something happens to my son, you won't be the magistrate for long. Xiao Anbo is so powerful. Emperor Chen walked out with a gloomy face and said coldly, the magistrate of Ping'an County eats the court salary and works for the country. Whether he will be the magistrate of Ping'an County, when will it be your turn to manage it? Xiao Anbo's face changed drastically, and after a start, he immediately knelt on the ground and said in a trembling voice, Your Majesty, Your Majesty. Emperor Chen looked at him and asked, tell me, if I want to appoint a magistrate of Ping'an County, do I need your permission? Your Majesty, that's not what I meant. Xiao Anbo's forehead was sweating, and he immediately explained, I was excited for a moment and offended your Majesty. Please forgive me, but my son would never do such a bad thing. It must be that the magistrate of Ping'an County was tortured into confessing. Please understand. I heard it with my own ears, how could it be wrong? Emperor Chen strode forward and kicked him on the shoulder. Xiao Anbo staggered and fell to the ground. That's 8 lives, Emperor Chen looked at him and said angrily, if the people knew that their taxes were used to support a bunch of beasts like you, how would they curse me? It was the first time that Tang Ning saw Emperor Chen so angry. He took 2 steps back and found that the hem of his clothes was tight. He looked down and saw Zhao Man pulling the corner of his clothes. There was a bit of fear on her face. It seemed that Emperor Chen's current appearance scared her. Tang Ning pulled the corner of his clothes out of her hand. Men and women should not be intimate, but she didn't know how to avoid suspicion and always got close to him. Zhao Man glared at him, grabbed the corner of his clothes again, and held it even harder. After Emperor Chen walked to the top table, he slammed the gavel and said in a deep voice, I want to try this case in person. Xiao Anbo trembled and fell to the ground. The emperor didn't need to go around in circles when trying a case. He just had to sit in the hall and show his identity. The son of Xiao Anbo who was forcibly awakened after fainting would confess everything. He had long been attracted to Su Shulai's wife. That night, while Su Shulai was not at home, he sneaked into Su's house and tried to force her. Su Shulai's wife refused to obey him, so he accidentally strangled her to death. Su Shulai happened to come home, so he decided to kill Su Shulai and ordered his men to destroy his body and burn Su's house to make it look like a fire. After listening to his confession, Xiao Anbo had already turned pale and collapsed on the ground like mud. What a big dog's guts, what a big dog's guts. Chen Huangping was dealing with national affairs, and such folk cases would not be reported to him. At this moment, his body was shaking with anger. Wei Ji unhurriedly stepped forward and said immediately, Your Majesty, calm down. The dragon's body is important. The dragon's body is important. He winked at Tang Ning, and Tang Ning understood and immediately asked Peng Chen to take Xiao Anbo's son away. Emperor Chen gradually calmed down and said, immediately, remove the title of Lord Xiaoan and demote him to a commoner. His son is extremely evil and unforgivable. He will be immediately handed over to the Ministry of Justice for punishment according to the law. Lord Xiaoan trembled like a sieve, knelt on the ground, and said in a trembling voice, Your Majesty, spare my life, Your Majesty, spare my life. Spare my life. Emperor Chen looked at him and said coldly, You ask me to spare his life, then who will spare the lives of Su Shulai's family, and who will spare the lives of the 6 innocent people? Ping'an County Magistrate Zhou Mingli, Emperor Chen suddenly spoke. Zhou Mingli immediately stepped forward and bowed, saying, I'm here. You did a great job on this case. He looked at Zhou Mingli and said, The capital is not like Lingzhou. I know you will encounter many obstacles in handling cases in your daily life. I will give you a jade token. Seeing this token is like seeing me. If anyone dares to obstruct, he will be punished for disobeying the order. Wei Jian took out a jade token from his sleeve and said with a smile, Master Zhong, why don't you thank your majesty? Zhong Mingli immediately came to his senses, reached out to take it, and bowed, thank you, your majesty. No need to thank me. Emperor Chen looked at him and said, Ping'an County is under the emperor's feet. If something like this happens, it will be a loss of my face. I hope you can fulfill your duties and responsibilities in the future and don't let me down. Zhong Mingli bowed and said, I will not let your majesty down. Emperor Chen stood up and said, Ping'an County magistrate is partial to his own interests and perverts the law, disregarding human lives. He should be dismissed immediately and investigated, and handed over to the Ministry of Justice for handling. Ping'an County magistrate is your assistant. Do you have any suitable candidates to recommend? Zhong Mingli said, I will obey your majesty and the court's arrangements. Emperor Chen waved his hand and said, the county magistrate will run the county yamen with you. I don't want to send another troublemaker in. If you have any suitable candidate in mind, please speak up. Zhong Mingli thought for a while and said, Minister, I have a candidate in mind. After Emperor Chen left, the yamen runners and constables in the county yamen understood what had happened. His Majesty personally visited the county yamen, and Zhao County magistrate and Zheng County lieutenant were dismissed on the spot. Last year, Su Shulai's case was revealed, Xiaoyanbo's son was punished according to the law, and Xiaoyanbo was also stripped of his title and demoted to a commoner. What shocked and surprised them the most was that the current emperor actually visited Ping'an County yamen incognito. In their eyes, the emperor was naturally a high-ranking figure who only existed within the high palace walls. Ordinary people would hardly see him in their lifetime. Who would have thought that as a small yamen runner, they would be able to see a living emperor one day? This matter alone was enough for them to brag for a long time. When Zhong Mingli walked out of the front hall, he saw all the officials of the county government standing in the yard in an orderly manner. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Seeing him coming out, everyone bowed in unison. Zhong Mingli looked at everyone and asked in confusion, what are you doing? One person stepped forward, looked at him, and said seriously, Su Shulai is my colleague. Your Excellency has redressed his grievances, so we should accept our respect. Zhong Mingli shook his head and said, this is my duty, you don't have to do this. The official bowed and said, Chang County Magistrate, Zhao County Magistrate and Shaoan Earl's mansion colluded to make Su Shulai die unjustly. We are powerless. Your Excellency is different from Chang County Magistrate and Zhao County Magistrate. You are upright and fearless of power, we are willing to serve you in the future. Willing to serve you. Willing to serve you. All the officials of the county government bowed their heads, and Tang Ning leaned against the door and breathed a sigh of relief. This time, County Magistrate Zhao was completely defeated. His father-in-law established his prestige in the county government with this incident. These people were convinced by him, and everything he did in the future would be much smoother. Moreover, he still had the jade token awarded by the emperor in his hand. Seeing the token was like seeing the emperor, and it had the same effect as the Shangfang sword. Although he could not beat the tyrant emperor and punish the treacherous ministers, in the future, small characters like Xiaoyanbo Wuanhou would have to stand still and take the beating when they saw the token, and would not dare to be rampant again. He rubbed his swollen head. It was not easy to take a vacation, but he still had to worry about it. He was destined to be a hard worker. A pair of slender hands reached out from behind, replaced his hands, and helped him to massage gently. Zhongai stood behind him and said softly, thank you for your hard work, husband. Who made him the father of my wife? Tang Ning put his arm around her waist and said, but you are really exhausted these 2 days. Let's go home and relax. Fortunate young gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 278. The Ministry of Justice acted quickly on the matter that the emperor personally instructed. The final evidence of the arson case that caused a sensation last year all pointed to the Shaoan Earl's mansion. Shaoan Earl's title was directly stripped, and Shaoan Earl's son was also thrown into the Tian Lao. The Ministry of Justice took less than a day from trial to review. 8 lives have caused a great public opinion, which cannot be calmed down at all. According to the time calculation, the son of Shaoan Earl will be on the list of executions after autumn this year. This is naturally a major event that shocked the capital. In the case last year, including the petty officials of the county government, as many as 8 people died. Even in the capital, this is a major case that has attracted the attention of countless people. However, although this case has attracted much attention, it was finally left unresolved. The Ministry of Justice was not sure whether it was a fire or arson, so the case was shelved. When the people heard about the case again, the case had been solved. According to insiders, the case was handled by Ping'an County Magistrate, who had just taken office. He was not afraid of the power of Shaoan Earl's mansion. He used thundering means to suppress the county magistrate who had colluded with Shaoan Earl in the county yamen, cracked the case, and cleared Su Shuli's name. The people applauded this, and after this incident, the county magistrate Zhou became a fair and strict judge who was not afraid of power and stood up for the people. Within 2 days, more people went to the county yamen to report the case. Tang Ning was originally worried that these cases could not be investigated further, but he did not expect that Emperor Chen would casually give such a sign. Shaoan Earl's case was not the most complicated of these cases, but it had the most profound background. Now that even he was removed from the case, the others were naturally not to be feared. With this sign, it was like having a guarantee, and he didn't have to be a frustrated county magistrate. The county magistrate could not give face to the many powerful families in the capital, but he had to give face to the emperor. In the Tang mansion, Tang Hui stood in front of the table, picked up a pen, and crossed out the 2 words Shaoan Bo. Tang Qi sighed and said, "Man proposes, God disposes." No one expected that His Majesty would go to Ping'an County Court. This time, Ping'an County Magistrate was imprisoned, Shaoan Bo was stripped, and the arrangements of the Ministry of Justice were useless. Ping'an County Court was an iron bucket, and it was difficult to infiltrate again. Since the beginning of this year, the Tang family has been unlucky, and almost nothing has gone smoothly. Even he, who has never believed in fortune, has some doubts in his heart. Is their Tang family really unlucky? Tang Hui raised his head and said, "Your Majesty has noticed him. Don't bother Ping'an County Magistrate for now." Tang Qi smiled self-deprecatingly and said, "I am a scholar of the Imperial College. I am nothing after leaving the Imperial College. Who can I bother?" Tian Ranjuzhong, the white-haired old woman, burned a stack of files, glanced at Su Mei, and said lightly, "Next time you want to do a favor, you can find a way yourself." Stingy. Su Mei glanced at her and walked back to her room. When she saw Tang Ning sitting at the table, she rubbed her eyes and said in surprise, "You didn't go to the palace today?" "I asked for a few days off." Tang Ning looked at her and said, "Thank you for this time." "I don't want to listen to thank you. What's the use of thanking you with your mouth? It's better to thank you with your body." Su Mei glanced at him and said, "If you really want to thank me, just play a few rounds of cards with me and sleep with me. That's considered thanking me." Su Mei is a realist, so when Tang Ning came today, she was ready to devote herself. While he was drawing cards, he had to be careful that Xiao Tao would peek at his cards and tip off Su Mei. This little girl would come over to take a peek, and then come over to take a peek. No wonder Su Mei never fired a shot. Tang Ning played a Dongfeng card and asked, "Do you have any evidence of the Tang family's crimes here?" Su Mei glanced at him and said, "Of course, it depends on the level of evidence you want." Tang Ning thought for a while and said, "It can bring them down in one fell swoop." Su Mei looked at him and asked, It's not easy to bring down the Tang family. What price do you think you can pay? Tang Ning thought about it. It's not easy to bring down a family with dozens or hundreds of years of foundation and in the heyday of the capital. I'm afraid she can't pay it back even if she sleeps with her for a lifetime. Don't dream. Su Mei glanced at him and said, if the Tang family could be brought down, they wouldn't have waited until now. You'd better not have such an idea with your weak arms and legs. Even she said so, it seems that the opportunity had not come yet. Tang Ning played a few rounds of mahjong and said, I'll go see my mother first and come back to accompany you later. Xiao Tao said while making the bed, Miss, do you think Mr. Tang has also practiced some kind of charm technique? Su Mei put the big doll in the cabinet and said, nonsense, how can a man practice charm techniques? He didn't practice charm techniques, how could he be so obsessed with you? But miss, you can't be so sneaky all your life. If Mrs. Tang leaves here and Mr. Tang doesn't come anymore, what will you do? Su Mei took a deep breath, smiled, and said, Xiao Tao, come here, I'll show you something good. Tang Ning didn't meet the old woman when he came to Tianrunju this time. The old beggar had explained to him what Gu technique was. After unveiling the mysterious veil, Tang Ning was not so afraid of it. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 279. After all, Xiao Anbo is a nobleman in the capital, and his title can be reduced at any time. In the eyes of the people, it is nothing more than the Ping'an County magistrate who is not afraid of power and makes decisions for the people. Today, the emperor is wise, powerful, and discerning. But in the eyes of other nobles, this matter is nothing more than an earthquake. The reason why Sungi is that in addition to a name that can scare people, he also has privileges that ordinary people cannot enjoy. Take Xiaoju for example, even if he does not take the imperial examination, he can easily fill a vacancy in the palace. Lu Jun, Huang Yulong, and others can easily enter the official career if they are willing. All these privileges are derived from their noble status. As long as you don't commit any serious crimes, your identity is stable. The major crimes here refer to forming a party and conspiring to rebel, raising an army to rebel, etc. The lives of a few people are far from being considered serious crimes for them. But because of this crime, Xiao Anbo was directly eliminated from the ranks of the powerful. The other dignitaries in the capital immediately became extremely cautious. No one wanted to be the second Xiao Anbo. The Sacred Heart is unpredictable. No one dares to test His Majesty the Emperor's bottom line. They can only restrain their own disciples. During this period, they should keep a low profile and don't get into trouble at critical moments. Tang Ning was just a 6th-rank scholar and had nothing to do with the powerful. Xiao Anbo's downfall would not be of any benefit to him, strictly speaking, it would be of some benefit. He received another gift from King Kong. It was only when he received the gift that he found out that Xiao Anbo was a die-hard supporter of King Duan, and this time he gave King Kong another big gift. In recent months, King Kang's fortune has been unparalleled. King Duan suffered setbacks one after another, and his performance in the court has become increasingly low-key. On the contrary, King Kang's line has finally exhaled and raised its eyebrows, stabilizing the pressure of King Duan. What makes Tang Ning regretful is that the gifts given by King Kong are lighter each time. If this trend continues, if he gives them 10 or 8 times, they will not be worth the previous one. The idea of getting rich by receiving gifts is impossible to realize. It is better to take the right path, work hard with Tang Yejing, and get rich through your own efforts. Tang Yejing has been working very hard recently, but sometimes Tang Ning can't see her for the whole day. Ever since rich man Tang came to the capital, she has been stimulated by no idea. She only thinks about expanding her business, and she has completely awakened the attributes of a strong woman. There are 2 Tangs in one sentence. As her net worth has increased, Tang Ning's will also increase. Tang Ning has no time and energy to take care of business. Xiao Yi neither understands nor is very interested in this. Xiao Yi opens a small shop. It's okay. If she is asked to take care of such a big business, she will definitely be in a hurry. Fortunately, there is Tang Yao Yao, who can let Tang Ning be a hands-off shopkeeper with peace of mind. The only thing that worries him is that the two of them are now very closely connected in business. There is me in you, and you in me, regardless of each other. If time goes on, I am afraid they will really be inseparable. But based on the relationship between her and Xiaoi, they should never be separated in this life, so there is no need to care too much. He took 3 days of sick leave and stayed with Xiru and Xiaoi for 2 days before returning to the Hanlin Academy. The Hanlin bachelor walked into the check-in room, looked at him, and asked, "Is Tang Xiaozuan's health feeling better?" Tang Ning stood up and said with a smile, "Thank you, bachelor, for your concern. Your health is much better." Academician Zhou said, "Tang Xiaozuan is the pillar of the country. You must put your health first. If your health is not good, I can allow you to take a few more days off." Although he didn't want to sit here bored every day, but he couldn't use the same reason twice in a row, Tang Ning still declined Sushi Zhou's proposal. He opened a book and read it. After reading a few pages, a gust of fragrance suddenly drifted around him. Only Princess Yingying likes this kind of spice. Zhao Man jumped in and asked, "Are you healed?" Tang Ning raised her head and said, "Please forgive me, Princess, for my illness has been cured. I don't care about you." Zhao Man sat across from him and said, "You have recovered from your illness. Now you can play cards with me. Did you bring the mahjong you mentioned last time?" No. Tang Ning shook her head. "He didn't promise her last time." "Then remember to bring it with you next time." Zhao Man thought for a moment and said, "Why don't you play Go with me? Go is available in the Hanlin Academy." Tang Ning closed the book and said helplessly, "Your Highness, I'm very busy, can't you find someone else to sleep with you?" "They don't dare." Zhao Man looked at him and said matter-of-factly, "Brother Tang Jing used to accompany me, but now you drive him away. No one dares to accompany me. You have to compensate me." Academician Zhou, who had just stepped into the check-in room, paused for a moment before quickly retreating. The princess asked Tang Xiaozan to accompany her, so it was natural for him not to join in the fun. However, although Her Royal Highness the Princess has not yet left the cabinet, if he remembers correctly, Tang Xiaozan is already married. It would be better for him to stay less involved in this royal matter. "I can't play Go," Tang Ning said honestly. Xiaoi had taught him how to play Go, but he only learned half-assedly. Anyone who had learned Go a little bit could beat him up, but he didn't want to find abuse on his own. "You lied." Zhao Man looked at him and said with disbelief, "They all say that you are a once-in-a-century talent. You are knowledgeable and talented. You are also proficient in music, chess, calligraphy, and painting. How can you not play Go? Very knowledgeable and talented." Tang Ning looked at her, and then asked, "What else did they say?" Zhao Man thought for a moment and said, "They say you are handsome and charming. How come I don't see how charming and handsome you are? What does a little girl know about movies?" Tang Ning threw the book away. "This chapter is not finished yet, please click on the next page to continue reading." This chapter was first published on AIU Voice Novel Network, please remember the URL. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 280. Chapter 278 of the main text volume of Ruyi Little Man, Lanlin Marriage. The man in rich clothes frowned and said, "Since ancient times, marriage has been a means for strong countries to appease weak ones. Our country of Chu is no weaker than the country of Chen, so why should we lower ourselves and let the prince marry the princess of Chen? It's not considered a marriage. Emperor Chu coughed a few times and said, Chen and Chu have been friends for many years, and there have been many marriages of princesses to each other in the past. The purpose of marrying Princess Chen this time is to once again enhance the friendship between the two countries. To dispel Emperor Chen's suspicion and fight against foreign enemies together is not to lower one's status. The man in rich clothes sighed and said, Brother Huang knows that national affairs cannot be decided by just one marriage. Emperor Chu pondered for a moment and said, I don't have much time. You and I know the prince's ability and temperament very well. With this marriage, we can more or less guarantee that nothing will happen between Chen and Chu in a short time. Big conflict. The man in rich clothes thought for a moment, nodded and said, Brother, don't worry, I will arrange this matter. Emperor Chu lay on the couch, closed his eyes, and said slowly, Now I am full of ambition but not strong enough. Please help me pay more attention to the prince and the world. Within the East Palace, a young man wearing only inner lining, bare feet, and a white cloth covering his eyes, ran around in the temple. Don't run away. If I catch anyone, I will reward you heavily. Several women, wearing light veils, hurriedly hid in the hall, and their laughter and exclamations could be heard far away. Okay, if you don't listen to me, if I catch you, I will punish you well. The young man said something with a smile, and hugged a figure suddenly. There was silence in the hall, and there was no sound. Hey, let me catch you. The young man hugged the figure with one hand and untied the white cloth covering his eyes with the other hand. Soon, the smile on his face froze and his expression changed to one of horror. He suddenly let go of the figure, a hint of fear appeared on his face, and said in a trembling voice, Emperor, uncle. The eunuchs and maids in the palace, as well as the women in thin shirts, also knelt on the ground, trembling with fear, and shouted loudly, I have seen King Xian. The man in fine clothes looked calm and said, Everyone, get out. Everyone in the hall hurriedly stood up and retreated quickly. Your Highness, please stay. When the young man was about to walk out of the hall, the man in rich clothes spoke again. The young man's body trembled, he lowered his head and asked, Emperor, what else can you do, Uncle Emperor? The man in rich clothes looked at him and said in a deep voice, Your Highness is the crown prince of a country. He will inherit the throne in the future. He should be self-disciplined and self-reflective, and should not indulge in playfulness. The young man nodded and said, Ben, I know this. Is there anything else wrong with the emperor? The man in rich clothes looked at him and asked, Your Majesty intends for His Majesty the Crown Prince to marry Princess Chen to stabilize the relationship between the two countries. What do you think of His Majesty's wishes? The young man immediately nodded and said, It all depends on my father and uncle. The man in fine clothes looked at him, shook his head slightly, and walked out of the hall. The young man's face was as dark as water. He picked up the wine glass on the table, raised it suddenly, paused slightly, and asked, Is King Xian gone? A eunuch ran in from outside the door and said, Go back to your highness, King Xian has left. Snapped. The young man slammed the wine glass to the ground and cursed angrily, Ask me what I think of you, and you still know to ask me. Bullshit Prince Xian, bastard regent, am I the prince or you are the prince? Why should everyone listen to you? You are so capable, why should you be the regent? Why don't you become the prince? I'll let you be the prince. The young man was furious in the palace, and the eunuchs and maids outside the door were trembling. It wasn't until there was no sound in the palace that a figure quietly slipped out of the East Palace. Letter to the palace. The man in rich clothes sighed, crumpled a piece of paper in his hand, threw it into the brazier, and burned it to ashes. He walked out of the room and strolled through the palace. When he reached a garden somewhere, he paused. Deep in the garden, a figure sat in the pavilion, staring blankly in a certain direction. He stood there and stared for a while, then walked over slowly and coughed lightly. The woman in white finally came to her senses, looked at him, and said, "Father." The man in rich clothes looked at her and asked, "Since you came back from Chen State, you have always been absent-minded. What's wrong? What good thing does Chen State have that has taken away my daughter's soul?" "It's nothing." Li Tianlan shook his head and asked calmly, "How is Uncle Wang's illness?" The man in rich clothes sat down opposite her and said, "There is still no improvement, but the imperial doctor said that as long as the condition does not continue to worsen, it is a good thing." Li Tianlan looked at him and asked, "But what big thing is going on in the court?" "But nothing can be hidden from Lanlin." The man in rich clothes smiled and said, "Your Majesty intends for the prince to marry Princess Chen, and the court will send envoys to Chen to propose marriage in the near future." "Marry Princess Chen?" After Li Tianlan was stunned for a moment, a look of surprise appeared on his pretty face and asked, "Why?" "This is His Majesty's decision, so you don't have to ask any more." The man in rich clothes looked at her and asked, "You just came back from Chen Kingdom, and you must know something about the royal family. How many princesses are there in Chen Kingdom now?" Li Tianlan thought for a while and said, "There are many princesses in the Chen Kingdom, but there is only one princess in the age of marriage. Princess Zhao Man of Pingyang is 16 years old and has not yet been married." "That's good." The middle-aged man nodded and said, "If there is no princess of marriageable age, this matter may be a bit troublesome. In this case, it will be a long night and many dreams, and things will change later. We will send envoys to set off in a few days." Li Tianlan thought for a while and said, "Father, I am quite familiar with Chengguo. Why don't you let me go with you this time?" The man in rich clothes shook his head and said, "No, you have just returned from Chen Kingdom. If you go out for a few months, I will not be able to explain to your mother and concubine. What's more, there are some things in the court that cannot be separated from you." "I understand." Li Tianlan nodded and said, "I'll go see my mother and concubine first." The man in rich clothes sat in the garden for a while, then stood up, walked outside the garden, and asked, "Last time the princess went on a mission to Chen State with her team, who was the leader?" The old man beside him thought for a while and said, "It's the Minister of Rites, Zhou Shilang. Invite him to come to the palace." In Changning Palace, Zhao Man looked proud and said, "That Tangning still wants to make a bet with this princess. I will not imitate the barking of a dog in front of so many people." A little palace maid asked curiously, "Your Highness, what did you bet with Tang Hanlin?" Zhao Man said, "We bet on who speaks first and lose. The loser has to learn how to bark 3 times in front of everyone in the Hanlin Academy. Although I didn't win yesterday, I didn't lose either. I won't lose today either." The little palace maid thought for a while and asked, "Why would Tang Hanlin want to bet on this? It's so strange." Zhao Man glanced at his mouth and said, "That's how he is, always weird." The little palace maid was silent for a moment and asked tentatively, "Could it be that Tang Hanlin didn't want to talk to the princess, so he deliberately tricked the princess into betting with him?" Zhao Man thought for a while, then an angry look suddenly appeared on his face, and he ran out of the palace angrily. Snapped. As soon as Tang Ning arrived at the Hanlin Academy and returned to her duty room, her buttocks were still hot from sitting, when Zhao Man rushed in angrily, slapped her hand on the table, and said angrily, "You are so brave." Tang Ning looked at her and said, "The princess spoke first, you lose. Stop pretending to be stupid with me." Zhao Man's chest heaved with anger, and she pointed at him and said angrily, "You just deliberately bet with me because you don't want to talk, you bad guy." "How is this possible?" Tang Ning looked at her and said with an innocent face, "Her Royal Highness is so beautiful and cute, how come I don't want to talk to Her Royal Highness?" Zhao Man looked at him blankly, her face suddenly turned red, she pinched the corner of her clothes and whispered, "Really?" Tang Ning raised 4 fingers and said, "I'm so mad at the sky, it's true. Since I'm so beautiful and cute." Zhao Man looked at him, blinked, and asked, "Then can I be the heroine of your next book, /13. 13482 / Fortunate Young Gentleman. Author, Rong Xiao Rong. Chapter 281. Remember 3Q Chinese website in 1 second, read wonderful novels for free without pop-ups. Tang Ning was a little embarrassed. The theme of his next book has been decided, and he really can't add a Yingying princess. Moreover, there has never been anyone like her from ancient times to the present. She wants to play the heroine just by opening her mouth. She has to give some gifts no matter what. Hidden rules or something. Of course, Tang Ning is not one of those unscrupulous directors or writers with low morals. He doesn't know how to make secrets about actresses or female fans. More importantly, he doesn't dare to make secrets. "What's wrong?" Seeing his embarrassed look, Zhao Man asked, "You don't want to?" "It's not that I don't want to," Tang Ning shook her head and said, "it's that the theme of the next book has been decided and the princess can't be included." Zhao Man didn't push him, and asked, "Then let's download the next book. Is it okay to just download the next one?" "Okay," Tang Ning nodded and said, "Then what should I write about?" "Yes, in ancient times, Zhejian left the fortress and Princess Wenqing entered Tibet. Otherwise, let's write about Princess Yingying and King Kaiyu." "I don't want it," Zhao Man shook his head like a rattle and said, "I don't want a marriage." Tang Ning looked at her and comforted her, "Don't worry, princess, our Chen country has no precedent of a princess getting married, so we won't let you marry in the grassland." Zhao Man felt relieved and said, "I don't want it in the book either." "Okay, then I won't write about heckin' grassland." Tang Ning nodded and said, "However, we have a precedent for marriage with the Chu state, and it is common for princesses to marry each other. Otherwise, we will write about a Princess Yingying marrying far away from Chu country, made great contributions to the diplomatic relations between the two countries, and will be remembered and praised by future generations." Zhao Man shook his head quickly, "I don't want to marry into the Chu country either." Tang Ning said helplessly, "This won't work, and that won't work either. In fact, Chen and Chu have not married for many years. This time, Chen and Chu will join forces to fight against the grassland. They will definitely find ways to stabilize their diplomatic relations. Marrying a princess is still very useful. It's possible." "Bah, bah, bah, you crow's mouth." Zhao Man put his hands on his hips and glared at him, saying, "How dare you curse this princess? If you, the crow's mouth, say it right, just wait for me." Tang Ning's analysis successfully made Princess Yingying no longer want to talk to him. She made a few noises in his room and ran out angrily. He shook his head helplessly. He was not talking nonsense. Although Chen and Chu had formed an alliance, they must still be on guard against each other secretly. At this time, of course, some diplomatic means were needed to strengthen the relationship between the two countries and establish a close relationship. A marriage is entirely possible. Changning Palace. This bad guy actually dares to curse me. If he wants to marry him, I won't go. Bad guy, stinky guy, I never want to talk to him again." Zhao Man rolled around on the bed with a pink face. After rolling for a while, she suddenly sat up again, with a trace of worry on her face and murmured, "No, what if my father thinks so too? I'm going to find my father." In the imperial study room, Emperor Chen looked at the Hanlin bachelors below and asked, "How are the performance of this new generation of Hanlin scholars?" Academician Zhou said with a smile, "Your Majesty, the newly promoted Hanlin of this year are all very diligent, and there is no one who is lazy. Among them, Tang Xiaozuan is the best. He is knowledgeable and memorized, has amazing talent, and has become proficient in Hanlin. As for the various procedures in the academy, I believe that Tang Xiaozan was wasted if he stayed in the Hanlin Academy, and should be better trained in various ministries in the court." The role of the Hanlin Academy is to cultivate talents and allow new scholars to become familiar with the regulations of the DPRK and central government as soon as possible. After 2 or 3 years, they can enter the various ministries of the DPRK and central government to take up actual posts. If they are already familiar with this, there is no need to stay in the Hanlin Academy. What you said makes sense. Tang Ning is even smarter than Fang Jie, which is rare in this world. However, he is still young and his body is not flat. It may not be a good thing for him to directly enter the court now. Huang Chen, after thinking about it, he said, starting from next month, he will be familiar with 6 books. He will study each book for 3 months. He will also take on the post of Hanlin compiler. Hearing this, Academician Zhou felt his heart tremble. Newly promoted scholars who enter the Hanlin Academy often stay in the Hanlin Academy for 2 or 3 years. If nothing unexpected happens, they will enter the 6th Ministry or other powerful departments in the court. Just like Tang Jing, he was directly transferred from Imperial College to be the head of the household department. This was probably the highest treatment a Nujinshi could receive. And according to His Majesty's intention, Tang Xiaozan was asked to go through all 6 parts. Anyone with a little common sense knows that this is to cultivate talents. He had long known that His Majesty had high hopes for Tang Ning, but he did not expect that His Majesty would actually train him as Prime Minister. Fortunately, in the Hanlin Academy, he did not have a bad relationship with him. Instead, he made every effort to make things easier for him. No wonder he would still be relying on the other party's support 10 years later. When he exited the Imperial study room feeling anxious, a figure trotted over behind him. He immediately bowed and saluted, "I have met Her Royal Highness the Princess." Zhao Man ran in without looking at him. Academician Zhou heaved a sigh of relief. Even if Tang Xiaozwen left the Hanlin Academy, Her Royal Highness the Princess would go to his room every day. As a Hanlin academician, he would not do it even if he said it or not. He would suffer in his heart every day. Once he left, Princess Pingyang would also go to his room every day. So he let the Hanlin Academy go. In the Imperial study room, Chen Huang had already picked up a memorial. He looked at Zhao Man and asked, "What's the matter? Is there anything wrong with Manu?" Zhao Man rolled her eyes, looked at him and said, "Father, I heard that after our alliance with the Chu state, the enemies on the grassland have been contained. Is it true?" Emperor Chen looked at her and asked with a smile, "When did Manu care about state affairs?" "I have always cared about state affairs." Zhao Man ran over and said with a smile, "In this way, we don't have to make peace with the grassland, right?" "Make peace?" Emperor Chen looked at her in surprise and said, "Why would we make peace with the grassland? The Sushan people are violent and warlike. You can't buy peace by marrying a princess." Zhao Man blinked and asked, "Then we don't have to make a marriage alliance with the state of Chu?" Emperor Chen was even more surprised. "Why should we make a marriage alliance with the state of Chu?" "I knew it." Zhao Man jumped up happily and said, "Father is so good, that guy dared to scare me, I will go to him to settle the score." Emperor Chen looked at her back as she ran out like a gust of wind, shook his head inexplicably, and picked up the memorial again. When he opened the memorial, his hand suddenly stopped. "Make a marriage alliance," he murmured and suddenly fell silent. It is impossible to make peace with the grassland, but marriage with Chu is a common practice between Chen and Chu. The late Queen Mother of Chen was the Princess of Chu. Chen and Chu have been friendly to each other for a long time. During this period, there have been more than one marriages to stabilize diplomatic relations. This method is indeed useful for the two countries. At least it can ensure that the two countries have no disputes and friendly exchanges for more than 10 years. Now that Chu is becoming stronger, the friendly relations between the two countries are far less than before. At this time, marriage can undoubtedly ease the relationship between the two countries to a great extent. In addition, the two countries have an alliance, and the relationship will be more stable. He didn't think about this aspect at first. After Zhao Man reminded him, he finally realized that the problem that troubled him for many days actually has a solution. He looked at Wei Jian and asked, how many princesses are there in Chu waiting to be married? If Chen took the initiative to marry the princess of Chu, it would undoubtedly be the greatest goodwill released to Chu. However, which prince would marry her was still under discussion. Prince Duan and Prince Kong had no wives, so the princess of Chu could only marry them. But the problem was who would marry the princess of Chu, which was another headache. This was not just a simple marriage, but also directly related to the position of the East Palace of Chen. Whoever the princess of Chu married was equivalent to announcing to the whole world that the position of the East Palace had been decided, but this did not match his current plan. Wei Jian thought for a while and said, Your Majesty, the king of Chu has no other concubines except Queen Zhang. Queen Zhang only had one son, who was the prince of Chu's East Palace. Emperor Chen was stunned. If so, this would not work. Chu had no princess, and they couldn't let their prince marry in. He shook his head, and when he picked up the memorial again, his hand stopped moving again. He raised his head and looked outside the hall, as if he had thought of something.